So our last presenter today is Brandon Hill. Brandon showed up in my illustration class in the spring of 1998, and he was not an art major. He became an art major, and I counted a great privilege to be his friend and also to have a small part of his career. To have known that and to have been able to help him. He is from Seattle. One thing you have the bio, I'm not going to read over that. You guys can read over that. But he has two beautiful boys, lovely wife, and one thing I will say about Brandon is that I think Meredith has just a lot of grit, and that's one thing I really appreciate about her. And Brandon is one thing I love about this guy is that he loves what he does, and I remember when he was in college. Try not to embarrass you too much, but there was also a kind of a curfew policy a little bit in terms of the building, like they have here. And not to get any ideas in your heads, guys, but I remember on more than one occasion Brandon hid in the building after it was closed so that he could work in the lab. He worked really hard. He has continued to work really hard. He loves what he does, and he throws himself into it repeatedly. And so it's my great privilege to introduce Brandon Hill to you too. So come on up, Brandon.
Oh, right. Okay, I'm going to work from my MacBook and my phone. Hi, my name is Brandon Hill. I'm a photographer, and that's a very nice intro. Thank you, Professor Bao. So I'm going to talk to you about my work. I'm going to talk to you about my story, and I want to just name this presentation, Fusing Your Story into Your Storytelling. Can you grab me my water? I'm getting a little hoarse. It's just in the back. Thanks. So my story, I'm going to talk about my story so far, and then I'm going to talk about projects throughout. Here's just a little overview. 2002, thanks so much. I studied graphic design, got my BFA in graphic design. Then I went straight to an MFA program, and I studied digital art. I was in Idaho for the first part of the BFA, and then I went to San Francisco for my art school. Then after that, I took an in-house graphic design position, and I was an art director at a publishing house in Kansas City, Missouri. Then after that, I decided to go on my own in 2009, and I became a freelance graphic designer. And then after that, I decided to try a new career path, and I decided to become a commercial photographer. My original plans, starting at age 9, was to be a 2D animator, a professional jazz musician, a political cartoonist. Oh, and you saw it. A puppeteer for Sesame Street. So I say that because I think you can relate to me, right? I mean, there's a lot of puppeteers in the audience, right? I say that because I assume there's a lot of people in this room who just have always known, like, whatever I do, it's going to be creative, right? I want to be creative. I need to make something, and maybe even make a living at it. Despite people who may not think that it's a viable career path, a creative person does a lot of creative things. I didn't have a creative plan other than a plan to be creative for a living. I drew all the time. I'm sure a lot of you drew all the time, drew in the margins, doodled, was always thinking about art, was always thinking about music. I wasn't good at anything else, so that's all I did. So I say this because I want you to know this is a safe space for people like us. Creatives seem strange to non-creatives, I found. And I was thinking about this a lot on the plane right over here from Seattle. I think it's because we don't know exactly what we want to do next. And creative work is known as being risky. So people who are not creative look at that and they think that's strange or maybe scary or maybe alarming. But spoiler alert, risks are unavoidable and also awesome. And every job, every field has risks. Like there's no easy path in any field. So if you get resistance from non-creatives, you learn to just smile and nod. When I was a kid, I could prove to my parents, like, yeah, there's animation, someone's getting hired to be an animator because Disney films exist. When I was in college, I had to prove to my parents or other people, like, yeah, you actually can make a living. If you just go to the grocery store, you see all this package design, all these cereal boxes. I would tell my parents or doubting family members, someone got paid for that. And that helps those non-creatives. Bryan Cranston is an actor who you probably know him from maybe Breaking Bad, or he played Walter White. I really love this quote by him. I think it's not a question of why, more a question of why not. And I like that because I think it encapsulates a lot of the attitude that I've tried to embrace, especially with creative work. He is an actor who's done all sorts of work. He's done comedy, he's done stage, he's done film. He's a guy who's just constantly taking risks. And I think it's a positive attitude. I think it's not based in fear. It's based in, yeah, let's try this. I mean, who cares if we fail? I mean, that's part of it, right? The more I think about creativity, I think it equals risk. Like every time I think about what does it mean to be a creative person or to make creative things, I just think it's inherently risky. Henry Matisse said, creativity takes courage. So you're painting something that didn't exist before. You're making something, you're putting yourself out there. Even if you're the only audience for this piece, you're making something that didn't exist. You're designing something that didn't exist. You're going somewhere that you haven't gone before. So creativity is risk. So the thing with Cranston is you listen to his, you listen to him talking about his earlier work when he was trying to be an actor at early 20-something kid. And all he wanted to do is just work. That's all he wanted to do. He didn't have any desire to be famous. He didn't have a desire to be rich. His desire is just to be a working actor. And I like that because I think it was authentic, and I think it's a reminder of this purity of just how do we just, if your goal is just to make a living doing what you love, I mean, you've kind of like, there's a simplicity in that. And it's an easy way, it's easy to get distracted by comparing yourself to others, to worrying about how am I going to pay the bills, how am I going to be better. But at the end of the day, if you think, oh wait, I'm able to make a living at creating something, it kind of washes away all of that pressure that we are always putting on ourselves. Okay, so I'm going to go through a little of my early design work. So like I said, I was an in-house graphic designer at a publishing house. So it was one of those jobs where we had a lot of logo work, did a lot of book cover design, some album design. It was just really a really good holistic place where I could create a lot of different things. And I loved it because every day was different. Did some branding systems, did some package design. I really liked red that week. Did a book about sex. Did a book about dirty dancing at the prom. Then I ended up doing the logo for one of the publishing brands there. Actually, that one was actually a really fun one because we talked. I mean, who doesn't love the FedEx logo with the hidden arrow? So this is a company called Beacon Hill Press, and I was like, how do we systematically take a beacon, take a lighthouse, and merge it with a book, which is obviously their trade. So that took about, I don't know, 4 months of just over and over testing. So yeah, a lot of fun physical media stuff. I got to hire illustrators, I would hire photographers. This was a funny one because I liked the title of this book cover, and it was kind of a good turning point for me because then I, instead of hiring a photographer, which we had kind of like an in-house photography, I decided to take the picture myself. And I liked the word usage, I liked the silliness of it, and I didn't really know how to operate a camera, but I just, I got inspired, and similar to what Meredith said is like, I'm going to just on the job train myself. I'm going to start just dipping my toe in what I can learn. And so I did that. Started taking my own photography for the work. And it wasn't because I wanted to be a photographer at that point. It was just because I had a very specific vision, and I knew if I just learn just enough to get by to get what this job required, I could get exactly what I needed. So I love my job. I was there for like 6 years, maybe less, five or 6 years, but I needed some risk. So when I kept taking pictures, it made me tempted to try a new career path. I started thinking about this. The number of working adults that I know who haven't altered their career paths, like either changed careers or switched it or done something different than their major, is zero. So if you switch paths, it's okay. It's probably what you have to do. And sometimes you switch career paths, or you end up in a place you didn't end up, and you wouldn't have ended up there without making the decision or being at the place you were before. Here's some of my early photography. So my early photography was a big, had a lot of inspiration from illustration. I studied all I could from the illustration from Professor Bao. I love the idea of telling a story in one image. I loved the simplicity. I love humor. I love something that sticks out and is a non-moving image. I loved entertaining the audience. This is a fun one. This is just a Christmas card idea I had for my wife and me. We lived in this loft apartment in Kansas City, and I was like, what if we just left the window open and just made it up like a less traditional Christmas card? And then, it got me a chance to use my strobe lights, use some wiring to get the windows out, and of course use some Photoshop a little bit. So I was really into, I knew Photoshop more than I knew the camera. I'd spent hours and hours in Photoshop on my in-house job. And I didn't realize that I was kind of also training myself for a new career by just the sheer fact of spending 8 hours a day on InDesign and Photoshop. And I was all about extreme imagery and composites and doing almost everything in Photoshop. But what I loved about photography is like it just peeled back just to the image, I obsess and geek out about typography like anyone, but there was something pure about the illustrative quality of I could think of something and make it. Digital photography had become pretty accessible by then. These were guys who worked in the warehouse, and we had a ping pong table. So I just want to talk a little bit about the art school experience versus art occupation, okay? So you're in your art school experience, you are surrounded by great leadership. You have mentoring, you have teachers who are helping you every day to craft your voice. It's kind of this iron sharpening iron atmosphere, right? You've found your creative tribe. You've hopefully found or are starting to find those 3 or 4 people or more who get you, who are artists like you, who've always created and always have, who wanted the same things you want, even if it's different mediums. You can obsess over the same things. I mean, my buddies, I mean, we used to think it was the coolest thing to pick out typefaces and impress each other when we could tell each other what typefaces were. And we thought the real world was like that too. We thought everyone would be impressed by that, but it was just us. And I don't want to leave out, in this time, you've gotten better fast because you're in this incubator of creative work, and it's constant. And if you're seniors and you look back at your work as a senior, as maybe a senior in high school or a freshman, I hope you see there's a big difference in your work. The art occupation experience, and I'm going to apply this to designers, photographers, illustrators, or freelancers, it's different. You've been trained to do this, but I just want to talk about the differences that you can prepare for. You're getting actual money for creative work. That's huge. That's awesome. You get like paid to do something that you actually might have enjoyed, to create something. Jim Carrey, the comedian, talks about when he was he first broke out as a stand-up comic, and then he was on TV. He got his first place, and he would tour his friends of this house, and he said, "See this lamp? Jokes bought this lamp. Jokes bought this desk, and Jokes bought this roof." And there's a beautiful purity to that, of just realizing like something you love, even if it's not even that great or cool or trendy, you're getting to do something that gets you to pay the bills. So if you really are positive about it, you can enjoy paying your bills, which I don't usually. Your creative tribe might be gone for a while. You're gonna probably end up at places that your other friends aren't. So keep looking for those people. You'll be surrounded by many non-creatives. This can be the hardest thing to get used to if you get an in-house job, especially at a company where they're hiring you as an in-house designer or creative. So these people might include marketing executives, sales reps, questionably unqualified department directors. What is challenging is that these people might not know terms like hierarchy and composition and things that you're used to, things that and it might reveal that their priorities aren't exactly like your priorities. But what this does is gives you another chance to develop some new skills, like the skills of persuasion and pitching and talking about your work in a new way to those non-creatives. You might have clients that frustrate you. You might have in-house clients or new freelance clients that really frustrate you. It's great to share horror stories with other designers and art directors about these people. But when you're with them, I've seen it go bad when the frustration rises to the top for the artist. You want to have a good rapport. You want to kind of treat some people with kid gloves and use it as an opportunity to work on your ability to persuade and pitch and really convey why this design might be the right direction for them. Your first meeting will be different than school. I remember my first meeting in my in-house job as a designer. I was blown away. I was like, I was surrounded by executives and marketing people, and I was like, they're making real stuff. Like, I've trained for this, but now we're in a war room where we're actually, like, there's some kind of risk involved. Like, I need to deliver because they're gonna print, 10,000 of these catalogs. And it really excited me. But I would have felt terrified if I hadn't gone to the schooling and been trained in the art school experience. So savor, learn, love your art school. You'll have to prove yourself out there. So here's just some book cover photography that I wanted to share. So this is when I was starting to cross over to freelance. I decided to keep doing book cover design. That was a big part of my freelance journey. I left that company I was at for about 6 years. I had a lot of connections in the publishing world, And then I just started doing the photography. I was like, I think I've done enough in design. I think I just want to start doing the imagery. So this was a fun book shoot for Ubisoft, where they're doing a novelization of one of their game titles called Assassin's Creed. This is a romance, and it's very like Gone with the Wind, romantic. There's a lot of that out there. This is a client, they saw that Christmas card and they're like, that's perfect. So they bought the image from me, and then I ended up doing the design for them. This is a book title on Joseph. This is probably a really good turning point for me, where I loved composites. I loved like taking a picture of someone in front of a green screen and putting them somewhere else. But then I really fell in love with environmental photography, like going there, bringing lighting there, and getting the mood and the moment that I wanted. So that's actually a beach. I didn't actually go back in time and photograph Joseph. It's a beach here out in Seattle, and we cast it, and we had a great time. This is a more recent one. It's this book for this couple, this reality TV show couple called The Roll-Offs. This is a textbook. Maybe it's at your campus somewhere. This is a young adult title. Again, by this time I was just doing the photography. So the photography involved production, involved casting, involved costume design. It involved a lot. The deeper I got into photography, the more I realized, like, oh, it's a lot different than graphic design. The nice thing with being a graphic designer is, like, this is your equipment. But when you enter in photography, there's a lot more. There's a lot more that you kind of have to worry about. And this is a recent novel I did for Amazon last November about a nice relationship. I also have done many romance covers, many Amish romance covers. And I guess the files are missing or something, I don't know. So that is like another thing you do. You just, sometimes you do work and you just take it because it's going to pay the bills, and then you realize, wow, there's an industry here that I never knew existed. And then you get known as being the Amish fiction cover guy, and then you're like, what am I going to do next? So I really started falling in love with, you saw my earlier work, and there's a lot of like self-art direction, where I get to kind of steer the ship. When you work with ad agencies, and if you ever are at an agency or you freelance or you're a vendor for an ad agency, it's really great. Very competitive, very boilerplate kind of experience. But ad agencies a lot of times have great art directors. So they came to me and they said, we have a Vegas conference, and they drew this. They came to me with this drawing exactly, pretty much. It was a sketch, but it conveyed to me exactly what they needed, and I got to execute what their vision was. And I loved it because it was funny, it was simple. We went to Vegas, we went on a plane, we cast all the models, we got a lot of shoots, a lot of hats. And it was just a funny image that says, kind of a what if, like what if you were on a plane and you realized, oh, you're on the plane that's going to the rodeo conference in Vegas, and it might look like that. And so it ended up being a fun 2-page ad. So obviously I love concept, and I kind of blend concept and illustration together. I moved to Seattle, and by that time I was almost a full-time photographer. But I started falling in love with portraiture. And then I realized concept plus portrait can still equal story. So I found some other great art directors that hired me to take pictures of actual people, not models, not characters, but real people who had led interesting lives. But this art director was big on concept, and it was a magazine. So it wasn't a newspaper, it was a magazine. So you can have a little more fun with magazines. So this is Lindy West. She's an author. She's a very funny, outspoken author, and she's written a book called Shrill. She's got a show coming out called Shrill based on her life. So she's outspoken, so we gave her a megaphone, we gave her a soapbox, and super fun. This guy, he came up with Magic the Gathering. He didn't really want to be at the shoot at all. So I played into that. I was like, just hang out, look back at me like you really don't want to be here, and raise your eyebrows. And then I'm going to put a dragon on your head. And then all of a sudden he started having fun when I started talking about dragons. This is called New Dads. This is actually a fun, kind of a personal concept, personal series. I'm still working on it. I started it a few years ago, using my own friends who are new dads. I was a new dad about a few years ago. So you're a new dad, you make friends with new dads. So my other idea is other new dads, putting cribs together, pulling out car seats. Yeah, you're a dad, you know it. This is another concept portrait on overcrowded schools in Washington. And again, sorry, I'm flying over here. That I like to get to know a person through portraiture is something I started like as a new love. All of a sudden I realized I could get to know people and not just models. So it was a little more exciting than what I'd been doing before, but it was an evolution of what I was doing before. I was using all my skills that I had learned in school and then in-house and then on my own and for my personal work. So it was all just kind of coming together. This was a concept portrait. Well, it was an editorial portrait for a magazine. There's this company in Seattle called Starbucks, and they invented this drink called the pumpkin spice latte. Another case where my art director and I were just drawing, we were sketching ideas. How do we just simply say the invention of a pumpkin spice latte? So I don't usually work with food, but it was really fun to work with food. And that took a lot of takes to continually dip pumpkin pie in coffee. There's many photos in that one photo. And that brings me to something like this. Like with magazines, I mean, this is all about a family having fun, playing bocce ball. This client particularly continued to hire me because I would include my Photoshop work too, because I knew what was possible. So in the shoot, I would take the shots I needed. I knew if we got 80% there and I'm on a tripod, we could get everything. So that's probably about 8 photos in one. So you guys work in Photoshop, you've seen layers and layers and layers. That's a good example of that. Similar to that, another one. This is a company called Rover. They work with a babysitting network for dogs. And I went to their office, and it looks like this. I mean, this is a Photoshop, but I Photoshopped. I took about 200 shots of all these dogs, and I merged them together, and that's exactly what the office looks like. It's dogs everywhere. And it was hilarious. In a normal office, downtown office. So it's that hybrid of I'm doing assignment work, photographing for a story, but I'm also creating an illustrative moment. Scuba diver. That's what he did. This is a science guy that they assigned me to photograph. And so Bill Nye, the science guy, he only wanted to talk about science and bow ties, and that was all I wanted. That was the dream. And so I only had about 15 minutes with him, but that's all I needed. I mean, when you photograph someone who is expressive and experienced in front of the camera, it was great. He was a blast. This is a recent assignment. This guy is the Washington State Teacher of the Year. Very awesome, dynamic guy, amazingly thick beard. We came in, my art director and I came in with about 3 ideas, and they were okay, but we were just not feeling it. So I was like, do your kids ever just like, put a pencil in your beard? Is it coarse enough? And he said yes, and we're doing it. And so that was all on camera. There's no Photoshop there. That's just a glorious beard. This was a fun turning point for me. I photographed my grandfather before he passed, and I started really just falling in love with faces. The power of a face and how we all have a different face, and we all have problems with our face. We're all probably our worst critics, but we're stuck with them. And photographing the elderly, like an older person just doesn't care what they look like, and there is just this relaxed, authentic experience of sitting down with someone who is like that. And then I just, through that experience, I started falling in love with more intimate photography, more intimate portraits. This guy, I had, I think, 20 seconds with him before the photo shoot was over. I asked him if you could, Will Ferrell's been photographed as a comic in a comedic setting for quite some time, but I said, just give me your most serious side. And he gave me his serious side, and it worked, and I actually tried to make it a little more moody. This was it's a little dark on the projection, but this is a really great experience for me to take pictures take an assignment. It was for an institution, a college, very similar to this, Taylor. It was a Christian institution. They were wanting to honor this biology professor named Donald Blake. He was their first non-white professor that they hired in the 60s. And so I got to sit and talk with him and talk about his experience, and how great. I think they were naming a library after him. So the portrait shoot really became about him. And again, he didn't care how he looked. It was all about just hanging out and sharing air with each other. And it struck me because he had these stories of, his first day in class, there were students who walked in and then just walked out. There was other professors in that town at the college who were signing petitions, even though he was this great biology teacher. They're signing petitions so that he and his family couldn't own a house in their town. He would go to restaurants and they would say, well, no, we can't serve you. And he would tell me these stories like they were just part of his life, and they were part of his life. And it was just a beautiful experience for me to share actually moments and to realize I've never spoken with hardly anyone who has experienced racism on that way. And it was a checkpoint for me to speak with someone, and then that experience I just let it just go to the top of the actual, like, let that work just be the reveal of that experience. This is another one where I was assigned to photograph a refugee from Ethiopia, and she was this beautiful woman who was exactly my age. She'd gone through refugee camps and many different ways of getting through the immigration system. And she was just pure joy. And her being exactly my age was another where, like, wow, her life could not be any different and less privileged than my life. And it really became, instead of finding the message as an artist, it became more about me as an artist learning from this experience, and then sharing that experience and hoping that the work gives you as an audience a piece of who that person is. And she was one of this woman who got through the immigration system, which is an incredibly hard thing to do. Her job was to mop floors at an office building. And she said, I praise God every day because I'm mopping floors in America. And it was just such and here I was probably complaining about my lunch being cold the day before. So having these experiences through this new love that I didn't know I was going to have, a portraiture, was a great new thing for me. So like I said, the audience became me at the photo shoot. Not just the message of the image, but the experience of this person. So from those experiences, I decided to call World Relief and work with them on a really fun campaign. I basically just wanted those experiences again. I wanted to sit with people that had lives that weren't like mine. So in this case, these are refugees from Afghanistan, Russia, Iraq, Iran. Some of these, like that guy who has a scar, he worked for our troops in the US, so a lot of them, they'll work as kind of a spy, and then they're like targets, so they need to get out fast, because so I learned all these stories of people still that were tragic and beautiful, and then I just let the work happen. Okay, pros and cons, total switch, social media and the internet. How's my time? Good. Am I done? Am I done? Pros and cons. YouTube can teach you a lot of new skills for free. Instagram can show you what people are creating every minute of every day. Downside is YouTube tutorials are predominantly geared for skills, not true inspiration. So hopefully you're getting a lot of that inspiration here. Same goes for Instagram. And I think of Instagram as just this amazing tool, and I use it, but it can be an echo chamber. So use it, but know, like, if you're following the same type of creative work, or the same type of photographers, the same type of designers, you might miss out on something completely outside of that wheelhouse. You might just start seeing the same thing, and you might start thinking, oh, that's what I need to create, is whatever I'm seeing over and over again. And those could be trends. It makes me think of this website, Flickr, that was pretty big back before Instagram. It was this photo community, and there's a lot of sunsets on Flickr. So I learned a lot on Flickr when I was learning my skill set, trying to figure out what a f-stop was. But what you saw is there was a lot of, like, you would see the same thing get the same kind of approval, and then you start seeing it over and over again, and you start thinking subconsciously, oh, that's what I need to make. That's the threshold that I'm seeking, and it can happen in any kind of social media. We just kind of can become. It's good to emulate, but then we can kind of become refractions over and over again. And then if you only stay in those networks, if you only sit in that area, you could miss out on the greats like Richard Avedon, who's not on Instagram because he's dead. But, like, go do your research, find what photography, what art, what painting looks like in the flesh. You could miss out on someone like Sally Mann or Dan Winters. Real giants of whatever your industry is. And if you go to a Barnes & Noble and you see any of their work, like, if you want to write down anything, write down their names. If you see their work on the page, like, you'll probably have an emotional experience. I mean, it's just that good, whatever medium you're in. So I'm big on personal passion projects. You don't get paid to do it, you do it because you have to. And if you fail, then that's even better. But you might get work from it. So I've done personal projects. I haven't gotten paid anything, but I've gotten press that I never got before with my clientele. Which is really interesting to do that. And I think there's something that happens when you do something personal and you get attention in a way that you haven't. Currently, I'm working on this personal project. It's called Living Shel Silverstein. I don't know if you guys know Shel Silverstein. If you have to dry the dishes, such an awful boring chore. If you have to dry the dishes instead of going to the store, if you have to dry the dishes and drop one on the floor, maybe they won't let you dry the dishes anymore. So he is this hilarious, clever poet, artist, and he's affected so many people's lives just because of his work. And I just wanted to pay tribute to him, so I'm doing a photography series based on his work. So it's kind of like a case study, it takes extra time, but I mean, it's why I'm doing it. I have to do a personal series. It allows me to study what do I like about a simple pen and ink sketch, and then how can I incorporate my work to pay tribute and learn from it. And the thing that I like about personal work is, like, if you make a series, if you're making personal work, make it a series, because there's something cohesive about having a group of images or a group of work. It keeps you on track too. This drawing looked a lot like my son, so I said I'm just going to cast my son in it. I paid him with Twizzlers. And I got to say, I mean, you know, you go out into the work world and you have to kind of find your school, and sometimes a personal series is what the key is like getting back to a project, like making your own master's project. So I highly encourage you guys to do that in school, but especially outside school. Finding yourself in the new type of assignments before turning work down. So lately I've had a lot of clients ask me to do different type of work that I didn't see myself doing. I never saw myself doing lifestyle work, but new clients have asked me to do work. And so I said, okay, how can I be a storyteller in a completely different type of photography? And so here's just I'll just flash through this really quick. I mean, so this is a job I did in Los Angeles for Purina. I mean, who doesn't love dogs, right? And then through this project, I was like, hey, I do like this. I do like this kind of work. I never would have sought it, but I'm glad the client said they saw something in my work that they thought could work. And then the cool thing with ads is, you know, print work, it is like illustration. You need to tell a story in one frame, usually. And then in 2018, I got to start doing some work with Nintendo. They have this product called the Nintendo Switch, which is super fun. Again, you know, storytelling with really pretty looking people who have never met and are pretending to be friends and family. So this is for a Pokemon game. And the nice thing with these larger clients is I get to just literally walk. I mean, the production is taken care of. I'm not having to do any of the planning. I just basically plan what I need, my lighting, the shot list. I go through with the art director. They're crazy. They're crazy days. They're intense. That is a Pokeball, I think. And then another client came to me and said, I think you should take pictures of board games. And I never would have thought I'd like to doing that, but this is a recent project for this Disney board game that you get to play as just the villains. So like Maleficent and Jafar. So trying to find the storytelling, this was a really fun storytelling shoot, again in a different medium. It was fashion. That is one of the oldest buildings in Seattle. It's a clock tower at King Street Station. So the art director said, we're going to tell a story about two models who meet in the top of the clock tower. So that's the clock tower, and that's the inside of the clock tower. It was super fun, super dingy. That watch was like double the budget of the whole photo shoot. I didn't even touch it. I was too scared. This is the train station. And again, I mean, by this point I was like, yeah, just going to the environment is super exciting. Just to live off the actual space that we're photographing. This is a steam plant. Did another fashion shoot for the same client. That guy's really handsome. And he knows it. These are a little dark. Instagram stories. I think Instagram stories are great because you can show your process. I basically use them as blogs. screenshot everything, screenshot my process. Please follow me after this, and you can see what I'm doing to take pictures. How do I light things? It's also helpful for me is just like learning my own process, like learning why I make the decision. Sometimes I'm not sure until I start talking about it and writing about it. And I get great response from photographers and artists and even clients too. So I'm pretty deliberate about my Instagram stories. That was the shot that we were trying to accomplish. It was a board game where you only play it in like pitch black dark. So they're like, how do we create an image of 2-3 kids having fun in the dark, and it's only lit by this little figure. So there's a lot of technical stuff, and they just needed one image, and that's the final image. Really fun. That kid on the left was crazy. We gave him so much sugar, it was not wise. Because we have craft tables for models, but kids don't know when to say stop. But the other two were very professional. Just another piece of the Instagram story. Yeah, that one photo shoot I did at the Teacher of the Year. You will keep growing. Your skills will evolve. Your work will change. So if you look back at your work from 2, 3, 4 years and you wince and you're like, I don't know, I thought that was good. I thought that was a really cool piece of art. That means you're doing it right. That means you're growing and you're getting better and you're trying new things. Ira Glass says, it's only by going through a volume of work that you will close that gap and your work will become as good as your ambitions. Take risks and just keep making stuff. Thanks a lot. Sorry if I went over.
I'm sure you got models in a lot of different ways. Don't tell us about the ones you just walked on and they were already there, but how do you, getting models to shoot, how have you made those connections, made that happen?
Like for assignments and commercial shoots, yeah.
For freelance work that you're doing.
Yeah, I found, recently I found a really great model from just like networking events. You know, like for models that are agency repped, they will probably work for free because if it's for their photography, but sometimes you'll have to end up paying for models. So if it's for personal work, going to networking things, meetups, AIGA stuff, I found, because I like unique looking people, so they might not even be models, like professional models. So it kind of comes in all sorts of situations. Sometimes I've asked people who I didn't even think would say yes to model for me, and they're excited, and they get something out of it too. They might get a headshot portrait out of it too. But for larger campaigns, we'll have castings. We'll do, like for the Nintendo shoot, we spent a whole day just going through about 200 models, basically just taking their picture, taking pictures of their hands. It's more of like just that kind of search, and then the art director will go through all of them. Hope that helps. Yeah. Oh, that's a really good one. With freelance, you have to worry about a lot of other things like how to pay yourself, how to not overspend what you're making, taxes, accounting. It's not fun. That stuff is not fun. But you have freedom. Like you can go anywhere. No one is it's a small price to pay for freedom. You also have time, like when you're not working, you have time to focus on how do I get more work, you know? So it's all about you and your business. So you have full ownership over that. It's fun and scary, and I'd say, some people try it right out of college, and that's really, really ambitious. But I know people have done it, In-house is great because you're guaranteed a check every 2 weeks like any other job, and hopefully insurance. So when I was getting out of college, like I was telling Professor about, I had no desire to be a fine artist. I had no desire to be a freelancer. I just wanted an in-house job so I could pay the bills. Then I did that for a while, and then I was like, oh, I kind of want to be a freelancer. I don't want to be. And then I became a freelancer. And now I'm at a place where like, now I kind of want to be a fine artist. So it's this rotation. So yeah, you'll change your mind. Thanks a lot.